We've just come from a little place called Murupara. And I don't know, does anyone know Murupara? Yeah, oh geez, there's a lot of Murupara people here probably, right? And in one sense, it's sort of like a sleepy little town, just outside, about 40 minutes outside Rotorua. And there's a kaumatua there called Pembird. And I remember that, so he invited us to come and meet with him. And just to come in. And Moka and I had been there before twice. Once we stayed the night and we just enjoyed being there with him and his wife, and then we came again because he asked us to come. But the very first time that I met Pem was when I was in Parliament, and what had happened in 2019, there was the COVID-19 Public Health Response Bill. And it was a bill that was actually then putting into law unwarranted access not only into our homes, into our businesses, but also in particular unwarranted access into all of the maraes up and down the country. And then so they'd put this bill in. And I knew that the bill was wrong, but it wasn't my bill because I wasn't speaking on it. But then my phone started going off. And I had all of these Māori leaders were saying to me, "Can you speak for us?" And I said, "Well, why don't you ask," I actually said this, "haven't you asked the bros on the other side?" And they said, "We did, but they don't want to speak." None of them want to speak. None of the Māori MPs wanted to speak on this. And they said, "We need someone. Will you speak on this bill?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll speak on this bill." I said, "I'll be your shotgun, you just load me up." And so sure enough, they gave me all the bullets. And what were the bullets? It was an exposure draft that had been given to them by Jacinda Ardern, by David Parker, of the bill. Because you see, when a bill is rushed through what they call urgency, you have to sort of try and think that you're appeasing people, so you send them this thing called an exposure draft. In other words, you get to see it before anyone else and you can comment on it. So the funeral directors had commented on it, the Māori leaders had commented on it, but the government of the day, the Labour government, didn't want to listen to any of them. So I even had the funeral directors contact me. So man, I was loaded up with all of these information and about to go into the house. And it was at that time that I began to speak into the house about that. But you see, since Lyle, you opened up the door to talk about things that are prophetic. What had happened for us was that the Lord had spoken to us about praying and interceding around Parliament. And as we started to do that, that early morning at 5 a.m, when I was praying, Moka said, "I really sense there's a mocking spirit that's about to come against you to contend with." I said, "Okay," so we prayed on it. And then what we believed that was coming from the speaker's chair. So early hours of the morning, I put my hand on the chair and I just prayed. And what I believed was that I'm going to have to contend, we prayed in the spiritual, but we contend in the natural and in the physical. So sure enough, the speaker, who's meant to be the neutral person, he started mocking me. As I stood up and he was saying things like, "You're not speaking on this bill. You're not even on the select committee." Now, a speaker's not meant to do that. But because we knew what was going to happen in the spirit, I was prepared in the physical. And so every time I mentioned Mr. Speaker, I knew that's what I was going to do. I was going to contend with him. If you look at that speech online, I said the word Mr. Speaker 45 times. I've never spoken that word, but all I knew was this: every time he mocks you, speak his name. Every time he mocks you, speak his name. Every time he mocks you, speak his name. And so every time he mocked me, I said, "Mr. Speaker," and I just went for it. I talked about the funeral directors. I talked about the fact is that they were only allowed to have 50 during a time of the funeral for families, and yet you could have 100 people in a nightclub, 100 people in a gym, and 100 people in a restaurant. So they were trying to say, how was that fair? And when the Māori elders were turning, leaders were saying that why would they give unwarranted access onto the maraes, they started really going for it. So I started going for it. And I did this cheeky little Polynesian thing. I said, "Where are those Māori MPs?" I know where they are. They're on their backs getting their tummies tickled by the Prime Minister. And only a Polynesian could do that. And of course, on the other side, they're going, "Rah!" getting angry. But you know what happened? It was the worst night for all of those Māori MPs because their phone went off. Every Māori leader and iwi leader in the whole nation started ringing and raining down terror on all of those MPs. And one of them was Pen Bird from Murupara. And he rang me and he said to me this, I thank you that there was one man that would stand for our people to speak truth into the nation. And so today when we went back and we sat in his house, he said again, you are that one man that will speak truth into the nation. And then he said to me this, always remember that your point of difference is this, that when we talk about faith, it's not something you leave at the door, it's something you take with you everywhere you go. Do not be afraid when people say to you, no, religion is what they call it. He said, we don't call it religion, do we? We call it wairuatapu, we call it the spirit. So it doesn't matter where you are, be proud of the fact is that your faith is important to who you are. And be not afraid to say that out. So tonight, Lyle, when you said that, even though this is a public meeting, even though NewZeal is a political party, we are unashamed of the faith of who we are. Somebody say amen. Amen. That's right. So I believe it's true. It is prophetic because there's a time where God is beginning to shift things in our nation. And he's doing it even through the realm of a political party. And I want to say this to you. As we have been travelling around the country, we've been down to the deep south. Well, we started off in Christchurch. From Christchurch, we went to Timaru and Oamaru. And then from Oamaru, we went to Dunedin. Then from Dunedin, we went to Alexander and Gore, then down to Invercargill. And here's the thing that's coming from out the south. They say this, finally, we're hearing the sound of hope that we've been waiting for. When we were down there, I wondered why, because Moka said, I believe that you're meant to go down there to ignite fire in the heart of hope of all the people that were there. And when we were there, here's what happened. I remembered that in 1854, when Parliament first began, it began with a prayer for Parliament. And it came from an MP called Maganji from Christchurch. You see, so there was a governmental honour for the man who started Parliament with a prayer, which lasted 165 years. They simply said this, putting all personal private interests aside, we beseech thee, you know that old English word that says, we cry out to thee that you would give us divine guidance, that we would conduct the affairs of this house for the peace, welfare and prosperity of the nation and its people. We honour the Queen and we declare this now in Jesus' name. That lasted for 165 years, which meant that we were, from a governing perspective, a Christian nation. You see, people can't take that away, even though they try to tell us, keep your religion out of the state and out of government, when the truth is, faith is a relationship with God that sets a set of values that has been part of, embedded in this nation for a generation of 165 years. And isn't it amazing? When you took the name of Jesus out in 2018, we've become adrift in all the values that held us steadfast as a democratic country. And so we were reminded of those things. And so here's the fulfillment of those prophetic words that have been prayed for this nation and for its people. You see, when we were there for 9 years, when Moka and I were there for 9 years, we'd spent our time. And one of the things that I'd learned when I went in there was to be able to sweep the floor. You know there's power in a broom. And you know why? Because it reminds you that you're there to serve. And when I went in there, I remember the people said to me, what are you going to do first? I said, I'm going to sweep the floor. In other words, get the posture of my heart right that I was there to serve. What are you going to do next? I'm going to make a cup of tea. Because that's what I used to do when I was an electrical apprentice. And so by serving, here's what happens. Doors opened. And so people of God are going to tell you this. Never despise the day of sweeping the floor, of making a cup of tea. Because when the posture of our hearts are set that we serve people, then we serve a nation. And doors began to open. Doors into the Minister of Finance. doors into Ministry of Education, doors into Ministry of Health began to open. And so while I was sweeping the floor, I was looking, listening, and learning. And God was preparing me for the time that we are in here today, as you said. And then eventually, I got a chance to become a cabinet minister under the Bill English Prime Minister. And what a great honour that was. But come at the end of that period of time, we came out of government and we're in opposition. And we began to pray, said, Lord, do we stay or should we go? When the name of Jesus was taken out of the prayer, it was really clear that we were there chosen to uphold the name of Jesus as a banner to the nation, but also to be a watchman on the tower. And so God took us to another degree of beginning to look and learn more about Parliament, about its history and heritage. And I realised that I needed to be better than any of the other guides that were taking people around Parliament. I knew the different plaques, I knew the statues, I knew the history and heritage. And can I encourage you that whenever you're called on a tower that's your responsibility, be the best that you can be. And so when I'm here in this position, I know all the history and heritage of Parliament. You see, actually Parliament began in 1854 in Auckland. Did we know that? It was actually in 1865 it went down to Wellington. And so there's this history and heritage that's important. Why? Because when you know that history, you have authority to speak into it. That's the reasons why. And I'm telling you these things is because then when God prepares the heart and the opportunity that for now, because when we came out in 2020, we thought that was it, our time was done. Moka said, great, we can go off and be happy and do other things. But instead, here's what he did. He told us that we began to pray. And we set up a thing called Intercessors Aotearoa. And so out of that, we began to build a team of people up and down this country, from the top of the north all the way down to the south, who began to pray for the mountain of government. And what we realized, what God was doing, He's preparing us as a people to know how to pray on the mountain of government like we've never done before. And so now we've got intercessors praying for government, praying for understanding how to pray. That government is not only just the politicians, but it's all the different departments that are there. Every ministry of health and education, ministry of MBA and economics and development, all of these things now, we know how to pray. And here's the other thing. Sometimes we focus on those who are the politicians, who are the leaders, but you know there are people that are placed in positions of influence in all of those ministries. And so while we're looking at those who will come through the election, how about we begin to pray and mentor and help support people who will be in those places of influence? You see, we need good people thinking about how they are in the health sector, how they're in education, even as teachers. You see, the transformation and the change of a nation is not just simply the change of a government. It's a change of a community and a change of a country. And that's what we're being led to. So we came to this point in time, and it was only 12 or so weeks ago that we said, Lord, we're going on and just doing Intercessors Aotearoa, Footprint of Faith, and then all of a sudden God does this crazy thing, is that His impression comes upon me, and here's what He said to me: let it go. And I knew exactly what it was, because you see, at the end of my 9 years, I made a vow, I'm never going back to that place. It's cost me too much. Why would I go back there? And so I walked away making that vow, and I knew what God was saying, let it go. And I had to repent of that, because I'd actually made a vow not to serve God wherever He would send me. As soon as I let that go, and I began to weep and cry, what He put inside of me was His love for this nation and for its people. And so what's inside of me here is a conviction that is unshakable, unmovable, because that's the love of God. And so it doesn't matter where we go or what I'm doing and where we're going in regards to Parliament and government, there's an unshakable love for this nation and its people. Why? Because it's God's love. So we can run at the mountain of government. We can face the giants when everyone says, it's impossible, it can't be done. Yes, it can, because He's doing it. You see, because this is a God thing. This is a God thing in what we are doing. And God began to prove the miracle day after day after day. And so when we got through this, and I remember I went up and I said to Moka, and I was crying, she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "We're running to the mountain of government." She said, "No, we're not. You can, not me." And then she simply said this, "Well, God's going to have to speak to me." And God did speak. And so we came to a point where we realized, okay, Lord, then you open the doors for what you're about to do for us into this nation. And we then said, Lord, how are we going to do this? 105 days out. I mean, seriously, it's the craziest thing. And then the Lord spoke through Isaiah chapter 66, verse 8. Can a nation be born in one day? Can a nation shift within a moment? Of course it can. So we said, Lord, then you show us the miracle. And so the first one was this name, NewZeal. You know, one of the things that's amazing, if we're talking about prophetic words, in 1991, Rick Joyner had a prophetic word, and here's what he said. There's a new zeal that's about to come upon the land. That will revive the church to do what it was called and promised to do, the original intent. And he said, there's this new zeal. Rick and Patricia Ridings, who came from Israel, who spent 16 years praying 24/7. As they prayed, they looked at the Temple Mount and they said this, I don't know what this means, but there's a word called NewZeal. And they said that in May. And we said, we don't know what it means either. Anyway, we'll park it away, put it on a shelf, and we'll think about it. And all of a sudden, God brought all of this back, and then he confirmed it through Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7, when he says this, His government there shall be no end. He will rule through the throne of David with righteousness and justice, and the zeal of the Lord Almighty shall accomplish this. You know what I love about the word zeal? It means energy in pursuit of a cause. That's what the word zeal means. So you see this, NewZeal? This is God's name. His energy, his pursuit for the cause of this nation. And it's a good cause. Then we said, we've got a name, we've got to have a look to it. And again, all within a day, we had an amazing man that came along who's had 48 international awards in branding and campaigning. And then he came and he sat with us, and we had a great guy who's got a company called Brown Paper Bag. And we sat together, we began to look at this and dream of what that could look like. And here's what we came up with, this vision, working together for the good of the country. And you know, I love this vision because at the moment there's so many things that divide us, but we need to find a way to unite together as one people. And I love the word good because Kiwis are still stuck on the tall poppy syndrome of saying, well, if you go great, you're just a bit too far. But if you're good, you know, the Bible in the New Testament says the good shepherd and the good Samaritan. I like to go back to the first beginning in Genesis. And through the 6 days of creation, do you remember he said, and it is? That's right. Okay, for all 4 of you. And it is? That's right. You're now believing, and it is? Right, because there's power in good. There's power in doing good for this country. And I love the picture that's here. Why? Because Aotearoa, New Zealand, is actually made up of our people. And that's why in Māoridom they call it tangata whenua. The uniting of people together. So we said, great, we got this. But here's the other thing then. We didn't have a party. We're now 103 days out. We said, seriously. And what we had literally less than 5 days to get 500 members signed up, to get a constitution, new board, and so forth. Seriously, it's the craziest thing. And then we approached a one party. Now, personally, I don't believe in a Christian party. I believe in a political party, but you can have Christians in there, absolutely. So we had this conversation, and here's what they said. This party was always been made for you to do what God is sending you to do. So from a morning conversation to an evening meeting, the whole party was given over to us. And I said, wow, that's only but God. Remember, can a nation be born in one day? What God was showing us, the miracle day after day after day. And so we had this party. And we've also had a prophetic word that was given over us that God was going to open the doors for us to be able to lead into where we're going as well. So you see, these are the things that are the confirmation of why we're doing what we're doing. I'm just going to run through some of the policies and priority areas, because people say, well, what are you going to talk about when you're talking about this party? So the first thing that we wanted to establish is that the number one thing that's important to the foundation of our nation is our family and our whānau. And we said that, there's a number of other political parties that talk about it, but here's what happens when you sweep the broom and you look and you learn and you listen, is that when you talk about government, you have to put family at the centre of what they call the paramountcy of when you develop any law, any policy that leads into practice. And most people say, oh, okay, so how does that actually work? Well, it works like this. At the moment, we've taken our family from the centre of our policies. So here's what happens, is that we've replaced them with the child. So we have the child here, and everyone says, oh, that's great. Yep, the child is the centre. Why? Because they're the paramountcy clause of our nation. We believe that children are our future. So where's the family? Well, the family sit here, alongside the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, and all the other ministries that go with it. Why? Because they're there to support the child. But here's what happens from a governmental perspective. Do you remember a year and a half ago when we were vaccinating as a country? Apparently, none of you were forced. There were no mandates. Did you hear about the news about that? Just in case you missed it. So, Ministry of Health said this: our role of responsibility is the care and welfare of the children. They should be vaccinated. They speak to the Ministry of Education. Your role of responsibility is the health and well-being of the child. They should be vaccinated. And here's what happened next. They came to the child and said this: you can be as young as 12 and you can be vaccinated without the consent of your parents. Now, I don't know about you, but that just sounds wrong to me. In fact, many people said they were outraged that that happened. But you see, this is what happens when you don't put the family and the whānau at the centre of what you do. So here's what NewZeal's doing. We're going to say this: family and whānau, you are at the centre. So if you want to talk to our children in regards to health, you've got to talk to the family. If you're going to talk to our children in education about gender, sexuality, orientation, you've got to talk to the family. You don't get to make decisions about our children without our consent. And by the way, we are the only political party who can get down to that detail. Everyone will say, yes, family are important. Yes, family are important. What are you going to do about it? You start off by doing this. And here's another thing that you add on to it about the family. We talked to educators and they said, how about we return the parents as first teachers? It's something that we used to do before. What does that actually mean? That means you've got a policy that will support families and homes and what they're doing. It could be education, it could be parenting, but we should be supporting our families, because you see, when you have the breakdown of the family, it also becomes a burden not only for the family and the community, but even for the country. There are reports that have shown that the breakdown in the family is a cost to the country of over $2 billion. But more importantly than that, it's the social, it's the emotional cost that has when there's a breakdown to the family. So for NewZeal, we believe that's really important, that we need to prioritise the families as well. Second one is the farmers. Are there any farmers here? Yes. Is that you, Isaac? I've been to your farm. One of the amazing things, Isaac, on your farm was actually talking to your mum and dad. So they've got a farm up in the South Kaipara Heads. And the reflection of the conversation is something that's felt by farmers all around the country. You see, we've created a blame culture. In other words, when people are looking for who to blame around the climate, around the environment, and then they have this finger of blame and it goes to the farmers. And I have to say that it was very moving when your mum reflected what many farmers are feeling when she said she never thought she'd see the day where farmers were made to feel like scum in their own country. And it's true, because now all of a sudden they look at farmers about how they care for their livestock, or whether you're producing food. What are they doing? What's the carbon emissions and so forth? I mean, the compliance alone has become such a burden that they're taxing and taxing and taxing because they're blaming and blaming and blaming. Here's the reality. When you tax the farmers, who pays? The family. It's called food inflation. You know, one of the biggest issues as we're travelling the country that people are telling us, the number one issue in our country today is living costs. Living costs. Let me give you an example. We got this funny story that I test this out. Does anyone got an egg story? Do you remember the day when actually there were no eggs on the shelves? Yeah. That happened at the beginning of the year, because I know, because Mocha told me to go up to the dairy and go and get the tray of eggs. So I go into the dairy and I look on the shelf where the eggs normally are. There's no eggs. So I said to Mr. Patel, where's the eggs? He said, there's no eggs. I said, I know there's no eggs. Where's the eggs? He said, there's no eggs. The government changed the rules and now there's no eggs. And here's how it happened, right? Do you remember the days when we had this thing called battery chickens? They're all stuck in these tiny little cages and they used to peck away and feed. And then what happened? People said, oh no, that's a bit too harsh. Because, yep, they were producing eggs, and in the end, they became Kentucky Fried Chicken. We said, no, I've got to do better than that. So what they did, they put them in bigger cages. So we went from battery hens to cage chickens, and then someone else thought, oh, no, that's, I don't know, can you say inhumane to a chicken? Anyway, cruelty. Maybe, sorry, they call it animal cruelty. So what did they do? They then said, no, they're going to be free-range chickens. So you can have free-range eggs. And so while you're doing that, and maybe you think that's a great thing, here's what happens. The cost, because of compliance, goes up. Has anyone bought a tray of eggs just recently? Who can tell me what it currently costs for a tray of eggs, say 30 eggs, size 6? Sorry? How much? $24? You're getting ripped off, but that was okay. $24? You're right. How much? $17. It's about $18 to $19 and $24. Even in Tauranga, they're $25. You know, only a year ago, they used to be $9 because I used to know, because that's what they used to cost. That's one example about how food is now increased. Why? Because we're putting more compliance on our farmers. So at NewZeal, by the way, we didn't come up with our priority policy area. The farmers came up with this. So our focus in NewZeal in regards to the farmers, so we don't keep seeing this inflation in our communities, is about ensuring that we work with and advocate for the farmers. No more new taxes that are unnecessary. Stop looking at all this compliance, because what we're doing, there's an ideology of thinking. The reality is that if we tax the farmers, somehow it's going to make the environment better. And now it's putting the fact of the planet ahead of the people. Now, I don't know about you, but out of those things that were good in creation, there was only one that was very good, and that was us. So therefore, we're meant to be looking after the people. And so at NewZeal, we believe it's important that actually factors that when we work this economy, we work with our farmers, we advocate for them as well. Just two more. The next one is around teachers. How many teachers in the room? There must be a few teachers in the room. Great. And so one of the challenges that educators are telling us, and we've got educators who've been in policy. In fact, one of the policy writers to our policy actually helped write the current curriculum that we have at the moment. I think it was Margaret Chamberlain or Mary Chamberlain who helped to write that. And he said this, he said the thing is that the curriculum itself, it's a world-class curriculum, has creativity and innovation, but at the moment there's so much pressure, there's not enough professional development or support, and teachers are saying they feel like they're being squeezed. And there's just too much pressure with this extracurricular teaching and learning that's happening as well. Even a number of teachers are actually pushing back at some of the so-called sexuality sort of teaching that's coming in, which is not what they signed up for. And at the same time too, they're not engaging with parents to get their consent. Instead, we're adopting things that come all the way from another place of the world called the WHO, and we're getting these standards that are coming in. So what we are saying with the teachers are telling us, let's stop that. Let's bring the sovereignty of our decisions that we make in our teaching profession back to the teachers. Let's provide professional development as well. The one extra thing I love about this, when we think about teaching and about education, is this word innovation. You see, one of the things that we need to also do is looking at, for instance, trades training and also innovation and ideas. Why? Because not everyone will go to university, but there are other ways that people learn. And so innovation and excellence is one of the things that we want to increase and have more of, especially for our communities as well. Just two more. Freedoms. We don't have to stay long on this because this is something that's already evoked emotion up and down our country. You know, one of the things that every year that we are proud of is that we go to our Anzac service and we sort of wait in the cold and we wait for the reciting of the ode. They shall not grow old as we who are left grow old. You know, the ages shall not weary them, nor the years condemn them. And at the rising of the sun, we will remember them. You see, we remember what they fought and died for, which is the freedoms that we've appreciated for generations. But we had an ideology that came in that began to shift, challenge, and eventually want to change that. They told us that we couldn't say certain things, even have an opinion, and I've got to say this to you now, even for those of religion, of faith, even that has been changed. We currently have a law in place called Conversion Practices Prohibition, which simply says this, that even the fact is that you may be a sermon, Pastor Brent Douglas may be preaching his sermon on a Sunday, and if there's someone in the audience actually that may take an offence, there is what they call a legal pathway to make a complaint that could eventually go into court. Why would you have a law like that? Now even a conviction, even having a faith has been challenged and even changed. That's already in law, that's already been passed. Here's what I know when I was there sweeping the broom. They have a thing called the regulatory impact statement for any law that you put in place. And on the regulatory impact statement for that law, on page 22, here's what it said by the government department. There is a risk, an extreme risk, that this could impinge on the rights and the freedoms of everyday, ordinary New Zealanders in the beliefs that they have. And despite that notice, the government of the day, the Labour government of the day, along with other parties like the National Party, passed that into law. So that's already a law that's in there. So for us at NewZeal, laws like that need to be repealed. People need to have the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, even the freedom of choice in their conscience to make the decisions they make as well. One last one is around businesses. How many people here own small businesses? Great. So one of the things is that, has anyone told you that you're the backbone to the economy? Say, I am the backbone. Okay, that's not very convincing. Say, I am the backbone. I am the backbone. That's right. You make up 550,000 SMEs in this whole country. Those SMEs are actually the thriving background. We've got corporates, we've got co-ops that are important, but the driving force in our economy is our small to medium enterprises. In other words, if you've got a business that has 24 people or less, that's you. You're the backbone. And at the moment, what we don't do is help support them to thrive and to grow. The fallout rate from small businesses is almost at 25%. But we need them to thrive and to grow. So at NewZeal, here's what we believe in. Let's start helping them in their first 5 years with looking at the provisional tax and GST. Let's put a back of office support around legal, financial and HR. Because if we can get them to thrive up to 5 years, now they're moving into sustainability. We also want to go to those communities. We want them to encourage to begin to thrive. Do you know that there's a research that the aptitude, in other words, the attitude and the ability to be entrepreneurial is greatest in Māori and Pacific. But it's the least that we invest in. And so if we want these communities to thrive, then we need to give more opportunities to begin to grow and to innovate. I remember being in Israel, and I started to see Israel is the startup capital of the world. And their way of getting out through some of the challenges financially is to innovate and innovate and innovate. Cameron Bagri, as an economist, said this: if we keep using the word recession, 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 we keep thinking of depression, depression, depression. And so he said this: why don't we use the word reset? Reset the economy by looking at innovation and technology. Reset the economy by looking at small to medium enterprises so that they begin to thrive and begin to grow. That's how you grow an economy. And then when you begin them to thrive over 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years, man, you're really pumping, and it's going. We don't need less, we need more. That's how we can innovate, and that's what we believe is important. And the last thing I'd say is this. What I learned from Bill English's office was that financial fiscal responsibility is less about money and more about attitude and behaviour. You know, we've had a lot of wasteful spending. A lot of wasteful spending. And there's one reason why we've had that is because the people who are down in Parliament have forgotten this important phrase, and it's called the public purse. The public purse was a reminder that all the taxes that are paid by you ordinary Kiwis up and down the country go into this thing called the public purse. Now that's the resource that the government uses. And yet we've seen time and time again attitudes and behaviour that have seen wasteful spending up and down our country. Things like fees free. Do you remember when that great project came out? It said this is going to help more young people go into tertiary education. Why would you first of all put it at the first year? Wouldn't you be an incentive in the last year? They said, no, this is a great idea. It cost $183 million for the first year, and not one new person went into tertiary education. So it was a waste of $183 million. There's more of that that's been happening right the way through. So for us at NewZeal, we believe it's really important that we don't waste and have wasteful spending as well. So I'm just going to finish there. First of all, I just want to introduce that, just so people don't know that I'm not the Lone Ranger, it's just me. And actually, we've got 11 of us that are part of NewZeal. I just want to introduce, I'll get Paul to come up and introduce himself. And this is Paul Adams that is here. And he's got an amazing story, and he's going to introduce himself. And I'm going to ask Hayley in a moment to come up as well.
Cool. Oh, look at all your pretty faces out there. I'm the old fella. I'm 75. So why would I be going back to Parliament? Well, I'm married, got a beautiful wife who produced 4 beautiful children, who produced 14 grandchildren, who's now produced 1 great-granddaughter. The interesting thing is I've learned that God's principles work. And I'm with Alfred. You know, we're unashamedly Christian. I remember Sue Bradford gave a wonderful speech down in Parliament, and I was speaking after, and I stood up and I said, that was a wonderful religious speech from Sue Bradford, and she looked at me shocked. I said, it's called secular humanism. And she didn't like that, but never mind, I said it. But just like Alfred, I didn't want to go back. When he shared with me that God said he's going to go back to Parliament, I always believed that he was. But then he said to me those few weeks ago, I'm going to go now. Oh, I said, really? He said, are you coming with me? I said, no. Been there, done that. And he said, will you pray about it? I said, yes, I will. So I prayed, and God showed me, through the bird, that it can work. It actually, even in a version of a proverb I was reading, it said, when the wicked are in authority, the government is easily toppled. So I said to him, Alfred, I think you can do it. He says, great. Are you coming with me? I said, no. And he said, why not? I said, well, God hasn't told me to go. He said, well, you keep praying. And I said, yes, I will. See, I was a professional racing driver. I was one of the first professional drivers in New Zealand. And when I got saved, I spent half my life as a non-Christian and half as a Christian. I actually prefer the second half. I've been both halves. So if you're not a Christian here, God could have his hand on you. You've got to be careful. He knows who to choose. And he took me out of motor racing at the height of my career. I was contracted to Toyota New Zealand Limited, and I didn't realise I was doing the last race in my professional career, a 6-hour race at Tuakau. I was in a very good Toyota Corolla, and there was a photo on that, and it was coming round the elbow of Tuakau on 2 wheels. Apparently it did it every time, and that was my last race. And somebody gave me a photo of it, and I loved it. And when I was asking God for a word, I was walking down after trying to find one because this guy was hammering me. You're coming in, we've only got a few days, you know, I need to know. And I said, God, it's not an unreasonable request. You know, I says, I need a word. And he says, what's wrong with your word? I said, my word. That's rubbish. Rubbish compared to your word. He says, oh, really? He says, do you remember when I took you out of motorsport? I says, yes, I do. I quite like motorsport. He says, yeah, it was your God, wasn't it? I says, yeah, I know that. It's no longer God. He says, didn't you write on a photograph? I said, write on a photograph. And then I remembered, it's my favourite photograph. It sits in the back wall of the shed. And I wrote on it. And then I heard the voice of the Lord. And he said, who can I send and who will go for me? And I said, here I am, Lord. Send me. He said, have you changed your mind? So I said, no, I'm going. But, you know, the reason I go is for the people. Because my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, this is one of the greatest nations on earth. It is full of rich resources. It has a people within it that if they're given the right facilities, they can make the impossible possible. We have sports people. This country has always punched way above its weight. But an enemy has come in to try and squeeze the people down, trying to restrict them, try to demobilise them. People that are in a small business, like I've had one, through no faults of their own, they have had pressures come upon them that has almost made it impossible for them to have success. That cannot continue. I might be old, but I've still got fire in my belly. I'm not spared to speak to a giant and tell him he's wrong. We will stand on what is right. People have been fed lies in this country by just about every political party in the country for 6 years. It's time that the truth again begin to rise up in this nation, that become the people of power that God has called us to be and desires us to be, and this country again will become one of the greatest success stories. It's a country the size of Israel, and that is one of the most powerful nations in the world, and we are going to follow it. This is a great man. I'm pleased that he's our leader. He's not going to restrict us. He's not going to hinder us. And he's not going to restrict or hinder you. We want to see your kids have a hope and a future. We want to see them know that nothing is impossible. I failed school cert twice. School was, I have another. That was not my go-to. I got introduced to motorsport by going to a hill climb with a cousin of mine. I'd never thought about motor racing, but I got the bug. And I said to people, I'm going to become a professional motor racing driver. Well, I learned there's a lot of people laugh at you in New Zealand. But if you are determined, if you're prepared to pay the price, if you're prepared to do the hard yards, if you're prepared to discipline yourself, that horrible word, you can do whatever you want. Yes. And I'm glad I didn't listen to them, otherwise I would have not gone on to win 3 New Zealand championships, to become a factory works driver, and to be paid well for the sport that I love. This time, we're going back into the positions of power. We're going to see the spirit over this nation shift. We're going to see the people rise up again. You're going to have a hope and a confidence. And I just pray that you vote for us so that we can achieve that. Thank you.
Not bad for 75. And here's the thing. If Paul can stand, then you can stand with us. If he's willing to have the courage of his conviction, then you too can have the courage of your conviction. You see, this is a campaign of courage, and courage is always contagious. Billy Graham said this. He said, when one man stands, it stiffens the backbone of others. And so we're standing. And as we've been going up and down the country, we've seen other people begin to stand. They keep saying to us, this is what we've been waiting for. So we can stand in our nation and in our community as well. I want to introduce Hayley Collins. She's going to come up and share. And I tell you, it's an amazing story. One moment we were praying. So we pray everything in. And we had to help to get help to do some of our billboards and get them around the place. And Scotty here said, we need to pray for an angel. And we said, all right, let's pray. And we prayed and prayed. And you know what? Haley's name came up. And I said, I think I found one. And so here's Haley. And then Haley came along, did an amazing job putting the billboards together. And then when we were putting our list together, we said, we need to pray who could go onto the list. So we began to pray and pray and pray. And Haley's name came up as one of those that we should approach. And then Haley can tell you the other part of the story, the God thing.
There's always a God thing, right? So I'm the young one. I'm 33. I think I'm the youngest.
Yes, you are.
Younger than me.
Younger than you. I'm absolutely younger than you, Paul. I'm 34. My husband's telling me and my mother's telling me. That's really good. I got older overnight. Well done. That's what happens in politics, right? But I've trusted Jesus my whole life. And I've lived following his voice and listening to what he says. I tell you, it's a dangerous thing to do, but it's a great thing to do and it's a lot of fun. And I've prayed for this nation for the last few years. I've been into lots of communities in different parts of the world. But God's drawn my heart really back to here over the last few years. And actually my first introduction to Alfred was back in 2018 when they took Jesus' name out of his prayer. And my heart was grieved. And I said, God, our nation is going to destruction in them doing this. And I went down to the Smart Jews for New Zealand and I saw Alfred speak. Didn't have a lot to do with him after that, but it started me on a journey that I wasn't really even aware of. But in this last little while, I've actually been working in the community for the last few years with hurting, broken people. People who've lost jobs, people who've lost family, people who've been vaccine injured and just lost all sorts of parts of their lives. And it's a bit new to me. I've always been in ministry prior to that. But I've been able to see the heart of our community and their cries and the things that are going on for them. But God was starting to call me out of that place and saying, you know, it's time to lay that down. So I laid that down and I said, all right, sit, stepping down. I told them I'd give them to the election. A few days later, I'm sitting there and I'm going, God, the weight of that has just lifted. I don't feel the heaviness that I've felt and carried for these communities. What am I going to do next? Again, a really bad question to ask God. I don't know if Alfred heard me, but that was the day that they were praying, and he rang me and said, Haley, will you come and help us do some billboards? I said, well, this is what I've just asked God this morning, so yes, I'll come and I'll join you. That was fine. I've been doing that for the last few weeks and talking to amazing people up and down this country who've been helping us get billboards up and helping us spread the message that we want to bring hope to this nation. And it's been such a privilege to be a part of that. And then last week, Alfred was doing his list, but on the Monday, I'd come out of one of our meetings that we had, and I'd gone down to a prayer meeting that was happening in my parents' lounge, and just talking about what God was doing, and the amazing things that we needed to, pray into, but also the things that, he was already doing. And as I went to leave the prayer meeting and go up and continue doing some work, one of the ladies there said to me, Haley, can you stay a few more minutes? I've got a prophetic word for you. Okay, that's nice. She knew that I was doing the billboards, but only on a minor level. And she said, Haley, I really believe that God has politics for you. I believe that he's calling you into a place of politics and everything that's happened in your life, which is a big long story that we probably don't have time for tonight. But he sets you apart for this, and he is creating you for this. So don't question it, but every open door you're supposed to go through, and even press on them. Okay, that's nice. Thank you. We're back to do my work. 2 days later, Mocha rings me. I thought she was ringing me about billboards. That would be nice. She said, I'm here with Alfred and with Steve. I said, oh, okay. She goes, we'd like you to be on the list for the party. Me being me, and I've had to say yes to God a lot of times in lots of strange situations that maybe I should engage my brain before my mouth. So yeah, okay. Well, actually, I did ask her what it meant, and Mocha in her wonderful tone said, well, if God moves and we get in, then you'll come to Parliament. Casually. So I said, yeah, all right, I'll come to Parliament with you. So here I am, standing with NewZeal, because God has inbuilt in me a heart for this nation. And as I said earlier, I've seen communities all over the world, impoverished communities. But the thing with those communities is they've been poor physically, but they've often had a heart of God that's been wonderful. But this nation is poor spiritually. This nation has lost so much, especially over the last few years. And I want to see hope restored to this nation. I want to see a nation again that can thrive and that can stand up with shoulders back, knowing that we are a people, and actually people that God has called, a people that God has his hand upon. And so, as Paul has said, if you vote for us, then you are voting for hope, you're voting for change, and you're bringing us in to be able to change the nation. And that's what our heart is.
Thank you, Hayley. We also have Kariana Black Verco. She's a Māori woman down in Rotorua. She has over 30 years of experience in education. She's got a master's with first class honours. She's completing a doctorate, and she's a mother of 5 children. And she said that her stand is the same as Paul and also as Hayley. She can't sit back and not believe that she needs to be, and believe that she is called into this position to be able to bring her experience and her expertise to do the thing that's important that God's calling for this nation and its people. We've got Lisa Marie Mead, who's down in Christchurch. She's standing in Banks Peninsula. And she's got experience through KPMG. She's a chartered accountant. She's run her own business called Social Currency. And she's a strong advocate for the community and for young people as well. She's just won an international award around chartered accountancy. And so she brings her experience and expertise both in accounting and financing, but also for a heart for the community as well. We've got Tony Pitiroi, who's down in Rimutaka in Wellington. He's had 35 years in business and believes that as this man with a story where he's come through the challenges in life to be successful where he is, and he's bringing a heart again to this nation and for its people as well. We've got Waipatu Winitana down in Wairoa. Does anyone know where Wairoa is? That's right, a very hearty little place on the east coast. And here's what he said. People said, no one comes to Wairoa. And we went to Wairoa. And so here's Waipatu putting his hand up too. Why? Because he believes that for all the experiences that God has given to him, he runs his own security business, but more importantly, he has a heart for the nation and for its people. And we've got Marlene Greaves, who's also too part of the team. She's down in a place called Tuki. She was a fashion designer. She's run a business with her husband as well, especially through Cyclone Gabriel through that period of time. She too is putting her hand up as well. We've got Tracy Pitta, who's down in Dunedin, who's an educator. She's done a master's in education. She's taught. She too is putting her hand up. Why? Because she believes she's got a contribution to make as well. And Watson Pitta is also, he used to be in Hekia Parata's office. For Māori in education, he was a senior advisor. And he knew that one day that God would call him back. And so he too is putting his hand up. That's 11 of us that are putting their hand up. Why? Because we believe that in our heart that God is calling us for this time. But know this, we bring our experience and our expertise. We will sit at the table of decision making in all the areas that are significant and important in our nation, at the table of governance. Yet at the heart of who we are is a heart of faith. And inside of that heart of faith is a heart for the nation and for its people. That's what drives us in the things that we're doing as well. So that's our 11. And we're very proud that God has given this to it. So this is your chance now to ask anything. Ask any question. I can tell you this now. When you go to places like Rotorua, when you go to places like Murupara, when you go to places all the way down in Invercargill, Dunedin, Timaru, Wamaru, there's no question that we cannot answer. Well, almost.
Thank you, Alfred. What an awesome team, eh? Let's put our hands together for this wonderful team. It might take you down a rabbit hole, but someone wants to know, what is your view on co-governance? That's the question.
That's the question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So co-governance is nothing new. It's been around for a long time. When I was a minister in cabinet, we used to have a ministerial portfolio called the Māori, what's called Crown and Iwi Relations. And inside of that relationship, it also was connected to the Waitangi Tribunal. It was talking about treaty settlements, both pre and post. And the word co-governance was a conversation that was within that sphere. What is new, though, is where under the current government, they've taken that co-governance out and they've taken a very complex situation and now they're trying to say it's a one-size-fits-all. And what's become even more concerning now is that the word co-governance is being weaponized to divide us as a nation. So for us, you can't go away from what co-governance was actually about. It's about a foundation that was dealing with relationships, treaty relationships that were there. And remember, in the treaty, there's two parts. There's the treaty and te treaty as well. And it can be a rabbit hole, but it's not, because it's an important foundation. But at the moment, under the current government, it's dividing us. It's now saying things like, oh, it's elitist Māori. Now it's saying all these Māori names that are there. And with this current government, here's what they've done. Rather than taking a nation to a better place, they've just changed names. And so now every government department has a Māori name, but no explanation as an English name. Now you've got political footballs where people are saying, get rid of the Māori names and go back to the old ones. It's not going to make us better as a nation. So for us at NewZeal, here's what we say. There's a word called kawanata, which means covenant. In 1840, Henry Williams, Karawha, had introduced that. When he talked to Ngā Pui elders, here's what they say. Te kawanata o te treaty o Waitangi, a covenant between two people. That's the conversation that we need to have. Not this thing that's dividing us. And at the moment, people say this, just get rid of it. It'll make us better. No, it won't. Because you see, when you get rid of it, you're trying to wipe out our whole history and a heritage. You've now got other political parties that are saying this, we're going to rewrite the Treaty of Waitangi and then we're going to have a referendum. That's going to further divide us as a nation. So let's be careful that we don't allow co-governance to be weaponized to divide us as a nation. Here's what you can say to people. It's nothing new. It's been around for a very long time. What is new is where this current government is forcing it as a one-size-fits-all for every single situation. And here's what it does. It means ordinary people can't ask the question whether they understand, whether they disagree. And now if you do, you not only get cancelled, but you could be called a racist. Now that's not what unites us as a people. But we should not be afraid of the courageous conversation that needs to happen. When I was at Parliament, here's what they used to do. They used to say, here's the Māori caucus, here's the Pacifica and Asia caucus, and sorry for some of you, here's the mainstream caucus. And they said to us, Māori caucus, you stand up and speak. Pacifica and Asia caucus, you stand up and speak. And mainstream. We were none the wiser or the better. So I started challenging that. Why don't we just say we're one caucus so we can have a safe space to ask a courageous conversation or a question? Because if we want to be better as a nation, we can't be afraid of that. You know, the human nature is this. Let's just get it done and dusted, over with, and then we'll just get on with our lives. Let me tell you the history of the Labour Party. Here's what they did when it comes to treaty claims, which co-governance sat in the side of that. In 9 years, they completed 6. And everyone said, here they are. They're the people that are all hui and no dui, right? Remember that little phrase they have to say? Along comes National. And then what does National do? It's got a very strong work ethic. And in that period of time, over 120 treaty claims were completed over the space of 9 years. And people say, wow, that's amazing. It is amazing because they got on and did the job. But here's a piece that's missing in the middle. Did it make us better? Just because you go slow or you go fast does not mean you've always done the right thing. And I want to say this to you. I believe why God put me in the middle to sweep the floor, to look, listen and learn, is to realize inside the middle there's a word called a covenant relationship that needs to be introduced into this conversation. And here's how it changes things. You don't dwell in the pain of the past, but you have to acknowledge it. When there's been a breach of a trust, it's called betrayal. And dealing with betrayal is not a monetary situation where we just pay people out and somehow we're going to feel better. But you have to get to the point we have to acknowledge it, and there's an emotional and a spiritual element where people have to feel they've been heard, they've been understood, but here's more importantly, people have been healed. You know, Haley was talking about the impoverishment of our country. You know, there's a brokenness in the heart of this nation and of its people that only a healing can happen. And here's what I would say to you this. When people say religion and faith don't have a place in there, I say it does. Why? Because we bring a heart into that. We bring a wairua, a spirit into that God has called us to be peacemakers, not just peacekeepers. You see, peacekeepers is what you're hearing, all the political noise at the moment, just to make people feel happy. A peacekeeper wears a blue pastel helmet, has a flak jacket that says UN because I'm a peacekeeper. Peacekeepers just want to make people feel happy. They say happy things, but they don't make things better. Here's what faith does to us. When you make a commitment, it opens you up. In fact, it almost feels like it gets worse before it gets better. And you know why? Because that's how peace comes into the heart of a man, of a woman, of a home, and will come into the heart of a nation. This is what we are saying at NewZeal. That's the prophetic word of what has to be different to any other political party. I want to tell you today, NewZeal, we're not just about making people happy. We're about bringing peace into this nation. And if you want to talk about a prophetic word, that is a prophetic word. But it starts with you and us. And this is the courage that we are saying to you that we need to have. We don't just say this, get rid of co-governance and we'll be better as a nation. What are you going to replace it with? That's what you need to ask them. We're not just going to get rid of Māori names and bring back English names. And what's that going to do? Is that going to make us better? No, it's not. This conversation that's more than political is the courage that this nation needs to stand for truth while exercising grace. That's what we stand for.
Excellent. Thank you, Alfred. Good answer. Any questions from the floor? Yes, you have one right here. Stand by, please.
Is it possible, Alfred, to get New Zealand out of the clutches of the World Health Organisation and the present passing of laws where they have a sweeping authority to mandate the whole of our nation and do whatever they want from a medical perspective, from a pharmaceutical point of view? Is there any possibility that any party can get us out of those kind of predicaments?
So the answer to that question is yes. So what happened to us? Yep. What happened to us as a nation is that under the leadership of Jacinda Ardern, she appointed Helen Clark to go into the WHO. And what they put together is a World Health Pandemic Plan. And inside of that plan, what they proposed to make us better as a nation, and as all the nations, is that we would follow a particular set of rules. But here's what would happen under. We will succeed our sovereignty. Our sovereignty is our right to make the decisions as a nation and as a people. We don't have to succeed that. And I'll give you an example why. I've been to the UN and I've been to Geneva when they're making decisions. And here's what I found out. So what's one of the biggest nations in the world? Can anybody name them? China. So here's China. Give me another one, another big one. Russia. Give me another big one. India. Give me another big one. USA. Right, give me a middle-sized one. Australia. Give me a smaller one. Give me a smaller one. Samoa. Give me a smaller one. Hey, Cook Islands is not that small. Cut it out. Let's go Tuvalu. So here's what I found out when I was at the UN. Each one of them, no matter what size, have one vote. One vote, one vote, one vote, one vote, one vote. So now there's this level playing field. So none of them have power unless they lobby, unless they put pressure upon those smaller countries, and that's what they actually try to do. So when you're there, guess what? You have the same power as the big guys, which means that you can retain your sovereignty. Now the thing is, Yvonne, we have to have diplomatic relationships because we're a small island trading nation. By the way, New Zealand, you are a Pacific island. Did you know that? So whether you like it or not, you're all Pacific Islanders, right? Or a small island nation. But the reality is, we do not need to succeed our sovereignty. And we certainly don't need to stand for some of this pandemic planning that Helen Clark has been a part of. So at NewZeal, our commitment is this. When we look at a coalition agreement, they call it a confidence and supply that you put forward. We would make sure that those elements of the WHO we do not have to sign up to. By the way, it's more than that, because under the UN and the Kyoto Agreement, in 2015 we signed a Paris Accord, right, which is around climate. It went to the Kyoto Agreement, and they had this thing called SDGs, which stands for Sustainable Development Goals. It was started at 50, now it's up to 145, and now it just keeps getting bigger. It's made to make countries like us feel bad about our contribution around climate change, around carbon emissions. But here's the truth that we need to tell the nation and the rest of the world. Our global carbon emission is 0.17%. Seriously, it's so minimal. We have 80% renewable energy. We've got thermo, we've got hydro, we've got wind and solar. 80%. That's one of the highest in the OECD world. But somehow the ideology is that we've got to get to zero carbon emissions. Can I say this to you? There is no such thing as zero carbon emissions. But now we've just had, remember 2 months ago, the announcement that BlackRock are coming in, investing $2 billion into the country to get us as a nation down to zero carbon. There is no zero carbon. We don't have to sign up to that. And so you can make sure that we retain our sovereignty. That's what we would do.
Question at the back there.
Kia ora, Alfred. Whenever you go to any of the big cities around the world, they always have world-class public transport systems. In Auckland, our public transport sucks. You have to have a car to be able to get around, but our roads are just getting more and more congested, and there are people who just can't afford to buy a car or to spend petrol on the car. Does NewZeal have a policy for public transport?
We don't have a current written policy, but we have a position. So here's what I know is that when I was with the National Party, we had a project and a program called Roads of National Significance. In other words, infrastructure that was important to thriving cities. So when you've come through the Waterview Tunnel, that was part of the initiative of National. So we would support, obviously, infrastructure that's important. If we think about West Auckland, one of the things that we didn't do well enough, we didn't have a busway, right? Compared to what they've had over in the North Shore. We should have had that in place. I know it's one of the things that we talked about. So good infrastructure is important. What I believe we don't agree with is at the moment, if you think about Auckland City Council, Councillor Chris Darby has gone on the record, has said that they want to put aside $1 billion for cycleways. Now, the reports have actually come out. Why are you shaking? Are you not a cyclist? No, neither are 1 in 4 Aucklanders are the only ones that actually cycle. So why are we doing that? You know, it's madness. One of the things too you'll notice is that not only that, but it's around our buses, right? So we've now got these junctions in West Auckland, Lincoln Road and Te Atatu, but there's no bus drivers. So we believe in infrastructure. We don't believe in the light rail. By the way, your taxpayer dollar has just spent $53 million on consultants, and not one new piece of dirt has been turned over to get light rail from the viaduct through to the airport. That's wastage. What we should have done is looked at different alternatives around there, and I think that's what we would do. I don't know about the CRL loop. I mean, that's gone over budget at the moment. Is that going to help us? I personally feel that we focus too much on the inner city when we've got suburbs that need that infrastructure and support as well. So for us, we support having infrastructure in our cities. Better infrastructure, better public transport, that's important. I'm not sure if we're big supporters, though, on cycleways. We've got enough of them at the moment. So that's our position. It's a good question.
Another one at the back.
Thanks, Alfred. Will you be repealing Winston's UN Migration Compact and the Dunes and Water legislation?
Yeah, He's talked about that when he's put through. You know, I tell you, it's really interesting when I think about what Winston has put through. So it was both you talking about the UN Immigration Act? Yep. So the thing that Winston's known for is immigration, right? And often he's talked about that. When I think about that, we supported the fact of refugees coming into our country, but there was a screening process. What we don't support is what Labor has done at the moment and the Greens, where they've opened up without a screening process where we've got more refugees coming into our country. Here's what we would support though. We've got a lot of RSE workers that are coming into the country because we need them for the labour workforce in regards to harvesting. And what we should do is increase, I believe, the quota system for Pacific. At the moment, we haven't done that. So when Jacinda had the Dawn Raids apology, what that whole process was really about was our immigration settings for our Pacific neighbours. If there's anything we're going to do to help us as far as the nation in regards to immigration or having those who would come here, we've got relationships with our Pacific that we should be increasing the opportunities more so than I believe offshore with other countries who come from war-torn nations. We already have a quota system available. I think at the moment it's about 2,500 that's already there. Under Labor and Greens, they wanted to extend that out. So that's the position that we have in that regards. But you know, Winston's always banging the drum around immigration. But here's the reality. Often nothing happens. Yeah.
All right, let's go with one more question and I'll get Tracy to come up and do some housekeeping for the party. Any last question? Cool. Well, let's not have another question. I'll get Tracy just to come in and explain a little bit about the bookkeeping that we have outside, and then I'll come and close the evening.
Just before, as Tracy's coming up, I just want to explain, hang on, one more slide. It's going to go across. Oh, I should do this one, the elephant in the room. So I'll ask a question, because people ask us this question. They say we're too small and we're too late. And so first of all, can I just say that MMP was designed for big and small. We've had 3 years of the old system called first past the post, where one party ruled. Now, guaranteed, most of you in the room will say this, that we didn't like that system, right? Because we voted it out in 1994. So now the pendulum's going to come back where people say we need a coalition government. So you see, small parties have the opportunity to form a coalition government with the bigger parties, and they take on a role of what they call the kingmaker. That's what small parties do. They have a smaller set of priorities, they commit to inspiring confidence, and that's why smaller parties actually play an important role, and we need good, small minority parties to form a coalition. The second thing is around time. People say, oh, you know, it's not enough time. You know, in politics, they say that one day is a very long time. You can start the day as a rooster, standing up, crowing about all the things you're doing and your policies and so forth, and then you can end the day as a feather duster. That's how quick it can change. Seriously, all of a sudden in a moment. Let's think about the fact is that it was only 3 weeks ago when Chris Hipkins, as the Prime Minister, was asked one question in the weekend about mandates, and you remember what he said? You made a choice to get vaccinated. Just one moment, and things can shift within a moment. It can happen so quickly. So one day is a long time in politics. Let's talk about the fact is that how could a party like us make a difference? Well, Paul Adams came in a time in history in 2002, and it was only a week and a half out before the election date, and Peter Dunn was a one-person party. He had one moment where he spoke a word that the nation said, we like what he's saying, and they had this thing called the opinion worm, and it went like this, it went up and up and up like this. By the time it came to the election day, he went from a one man to 8 to 9 people going into Parliament. It can happen in a moment. That's the precedent. So don't worry about time. In politics, things can shift within a moment. And we just believe that this can happen, it will happen, if good people like you become champions of change. If you believe the fact is that this is a message of hope, not a message of fear. Because what people are saying is this, well, we don't like this party, and we used to like this party, we're not so sure about them. And so what they're saying, that's Labor, That's national. They've changed. We're not sure, but it's the lesser of two evils. And anyway, minority parties are a wasted vote, so we're just going to vote for them. That's a vote out of fear, not a vote out of hope. And can I say this to you? When you vote for your values, it's never a wasted vote. Whenever you vote for your values, it's never a wasted vote. Irrespective of the outcome, it's better to know you voted for what you believed in than what you didn't believe in, because that's what you will regret. And people try to be strategic in their voting. Last time, look what happened. Labour got 51% of the party vote. People who were in blue electorates, national electorates, turned around and said, we didn't want the Greens to get in. Do you know what they did? So they gave all their party votes to Labour, and they got 51% of the party vote, unprecedented, and they ruled alone for 3 years. So don't be strategic. Don't waste your vote. Vote to the values that you believe in. That's a vote for hope. And I hope that you believe that NewZeal will have your party vote, because that's what we stand for. That's it, sorry. Here you go, Trace.
Hello, is it on? Yep. Good evening. You would have seen when you came in, we put these beautiful brochures, booklets which share the vision and the hope of NewZeal. A lot of what Alfred spoke to tonight. So please take one of these home if you haven't read it, and just spend some time looking at it, thinking about it. And if you're really super keen to help support what Alfred's doing and the NewZeal team, we have boxes of these available. So you can take a handful, you can take 100, and you can walk them through your local neighbourhood. You can take them to work, you can speak to people and maybe engage in some conversations, because there is an awful lot of people out there that have still not made up their mind. And if they can party vote for these guys, we can affect the change that we're needing in this nation. So please take these home. And another thing you can do to support is we have out on that red gazebo at the back there. You can sign up if you're interested in joining the party and supporting in a really tangible way, which means you'll get updates and newsletters and information as it's happening. And we have an email sign-up sheet. If you don't want to necessarily join the party, you can still be informed and hear what they're doing. So if you go to the back there, the red tent, or out by the reception desk, we've got the same clipboards out there, and just fill out your names, address, emails, all that kind of thing, and we'll be able to stay in touch with you. And yeah, put some legs on, some exercise this weekend. And another thing is, if you want to sponsor a billboard, they have started going up around Auckland, and we still need plenty more. So if you know, or if you live on a high visibility site, whether it be with a fence or a good spot where signs can go up, please contact the NewZeal office. And you can also sponsor signs. So if you can't physically put them up, you could donate the cost of that sign to help the cause. So those are just some practical ways that you can support and help and get involved. Thank you.
Did you have anything else you want to say before you close?
Oh, yeah. So just to let you know, this is our campaign strategy. It's called the rocket strategy, because we've got no campaign runway. And every day it's sort of the runway gets smaller and smaller. So we just believe what God gave in our hearts is that you can't have a campaign runway, you're going to shoot a rocket, right? So therefore you have rocket strategies. And it was quite funny, because going on to Isaac's property, his parents, is that they shoot rockets up there too. Because that's what Kiwis do, right? So what does a rocket campaign strategy mean? It means you have to think out of the box. In a short period of time, how can you accelerate the reach of NewZeal into our communities? So you see the book that's in front of you, it's a conversational piece. It sends you into the website, begins the conversation with you saying, look, here's what we stand for. We hear that policies come from the ground, from the people. here are the things that are really important. It talks you through the different 5 priorities, talks about food inflation, talks about kaupapa as well. And then it gets to a point where if you like what you see and you hear, then you can become a champion as well. And also, as Tracy said, then begin to accelerate. You know, I guarantee if you take out your phones, you've got over 100 contacts. If you committed over the next 26 days to contact 2 to 3 people, then all of a sudden you're engaging with people and now you're championing the cause. You take a book, when you go along, you can talk to people. Don't just drop it in a letterbox, have a conversation and accelerate that as well. We've got a great social media team is here as well. And so what you can do on the website, on your Facebook site, okay, you can post it, you can have a look at what we're doing, and again, tell other people about NewZeal, and even if you're bold enough, be able to say that I'm voting for NewZeal. So all of those things are part of what we're doing as well. The last thing I want to say is this. You know, I can be cute, Paul can be clever, but the reality is cuteness and cleverness is not what's going to get us there at the end of the day. It's going to be because this is a miracle that only God can achieve. And at the end of it, here's what we're going to say, but God. Because this is what's happening. We can't afford to wait another 3 years. We can't afford for people to say, oh, you know, or maybe if you get across the line. No. This is where you have to have courage. And you see, just as hard as we're driving this, not striving, stepping out, working hard, working smart, we need you to do that as well. And so become a champion tonight. Have it inside of you. Take those booklets into work and wherever you are, have the conversation. Talk to your family. Because you're Pacific Islanders now, because you've heard that New Zealand's a Pacific Island, become like Pacific Island families. Here's what we say. We're all voting NewZeal. What? We're older. It doesn't matter. This is what we're doing, right? You just tell them. Oh, of course, then you talk a bit later, right? Doesn't matter. But you have to have courage. You have to step out. That's the only way this is going to be happening, you see? And when you do, then we all say together on October the 14th, but God. And we begin to pray. I want you to pray not only that God will accelerate what we're doing, but we need a moment in time. And at the moment, there's a whole lot of political noise. And we need a moment, like happened in 2002, right? Where out of the noise resonates a sound of hope that goes out, and then all of a sudden, within a moment, things change. People begin to say, I'm voting for NewZeal, I'm voting for NewZeal, I'm voting for NewZeal. We're going around, pastors are catching it. I mean, seriously. At first, pastors didn't know what to do. We meet with pastors in lunches and so forth. They turn around, some of them are so bold, they took a whole box, and last Sunday at the service, someone said to us, you never guess what happened? My pastor said, that's it. I'm not preaching the sermon. We're going to pray for NewZeal. Why? I've never prayed for a political party or voted for them. But this is more than that. This is a kingdom thing that God is doing. That's what's shifting and changing as well. Did you know that people said you're splitting the party vote? Here's what they don't know. That every election for the last 30 years, 600,000 to 700,000 people don't vote. So there's a whole lot of people out there waiting. And as we're traveling, we are finding them, we're meeting them. And when I ask them, why don't you vote? Here's what they say, trust. We can't trust the system, we can't trust the people. After we talk and after we share and we have question time, they turn around and say, okay, I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to vote for NewZeal. And one of them turned around and said, but how do I tell my whānau and my family that we're going to vote for NewZeal? And I said, well, what have you heard in the last hour and a half? And one of the guys turned around and said, I heard the heart of a man, and that the heart of man was a heart of faith for this nation and its people. And I said, well, that sounds like that's good enough. Now go with that message. So when we're having people that have never voted in their life, and at ages of 50, now beginning to engage, now this is the God thing that's beginning to happen. May you catch the hope of fire in your heart that you will become a champion for change, and you begin to ignite the hope in other people, because this is what we're voting for. And you simply say to people, when you vote for NewZeal, you're voting for hope as well. God bless you. Amen.
Thank you, Alfred.